Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern. Since the Hamas massacre of October 7th, where women were raped, babies burned, and entire families slaughtered, Israel has been fighting a war for its survival. And yet, in a twisted turn of global perception, the victim has been cast as the villain. Today, world leaders like Emmanuel Macron and David Cameron are preparing to officially recognize a Palestinian state, rewarding terror with sovereignty. The starvation crisis in Gaza, caused by Hamas hoarding aid and using civilians as shields, is being blamed not on the terrorists who started this war, but on Israel. And the consequences are global. Jewish teenagers thrown off a plane in Spain simply for being Jewish. College campuses across America have turned into battlegrounds where Jewish students are harassed, barricaded, and abandoned by university leaders. And the media, instead of reporting truth, continues to frame Israel as the aggressor. It's all upside down. Truth has been hijacked, justice has been twisted, and evil is being repackaged as resistance. At a moment like this, we need voices who refuse to play along, who speak with clarity, courage, and conviction. And I can't think of a better person to do that than today's guest, Ambassador David Friedman. As U.S. Ambassador to Israel under President Trump, David helped deliver on promises others only talked about, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and helping forge the groundbreaking Abraham Accords, reshaping the region and defying the foreign policy establishment. He's written 2 books, continues to speak out forcefully in defense of Israel and Western values, and has never been afraid to challenge conventional thinking. On a personal note, David's a lifelong friend. We grew up together, and I've watched him bring the same strength, integrity, and purpose to the world stage that he's always carried with him. David, welcome back to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. That was such a great introduction. I'm not sure what there is to add. You've covered everything. I agree violently with everything you just said. And if there's anything left, I'm happy to answer your questions. But that was a fabulous introduction.
Well, I think there's a lot to discuss, and I'd love to get your input on so many different things. Firstly, I wanted to start with the Abraham Accords. So, David, you were one of the architects of the Abraham Accords, a historic breakthrough, fundamentally changed the way we think about peace in the Middle East. Unlike previous approaches that prioritized solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict first, the Accords flipped the script, building normalization between Israel and Arab nations as a path to regional stability and shared prosperity. Could you walk us through the strategic thinking behind the Abraham Accords? Tell us what was the thought process that led us to that, and you and the Trump administration, what were you trying to achieve? Could you talk about that?
Sure, happy to. So I think the first point to make is that Israel had covert relations with these countries in the past. You know, the Mossad, other covert organizations and political discussions were already taking place. It wasn't like these countries didn't know each other. And that, by the way, remains true with Arab countries that are not yet members of the Abraham Accords, like Saudi Arabia. The breakthrough in the Abraham Accords was the ability to surface these relationships so that they now became public. And once something is public, you know, the opportunities for advancement, the opportunities for cooperation, the opportunities to socialize this normalization with the people on the street is enhanced dramatically. So we knew going in that that there already were the seeds, the kernels of relationships. And the question was, how do you get them up to the surface? And you know, what I've said is that there really are 3 essential ingredients to the Abraham Accords. One, you need a very strong Israel. Number 2, you need a very, very rock solid, unbreakable, no daylight relationship between Israel and the United States. And then third, you need, through that process, you need a weak Iran. And what that does is, what that signals to the countries that we normalized with, whether it was UAE or Bahrain or Morocco, what it signals is that Israel really is not going anywhere. Israel is an attractive partner. It's worth it for these countries to take a little bit of risk on their streets to join what I refer to as this circle of trust that Israel and America are already part of. Now, when we left office, so the first, four Abraham Accords were done, through 2020. And when we left office, we had those ingredients in place. Israel and America were at this, historic level of closeness. Iran had been the subject of backbreaking sanctions, and Israel, independent of all that, was a very strong country, and that kind of induced these countries to come in. Now we left office. What happened? Biden turned it upside down. So he created a fair amount of daylight, and after the war began, a lot of daylight between Israel and the United States. He relieved Iran of most of their sanctions, um, and Israel became enmeshed in a seven-front war. So with those ingredients in place, we weren't, it was obvious there was lip service paid by the Biden administration to expanding the Abraham Accords, but it wasn't going to go anywhere because of the circumstances weren't right. Now we come back in, and there's the switch has pretty much been flipped again. Israel has performed, beyond miraculously in this war. I mean, it's not over yet, and there's still a lot of work to be done, unfortunately, in Gaza. But places like Lebanon and Syria and Iran. I mean, Israel's profile in its battle against those countries has never been higher. Iran, obviously, we all saw what happened to Iran over the last couple of months. And Trump and Netanyahu have established a relationship that we haven't seen in history between two world leaders at all, let alone between Israel and America. So we're back in business, if you will, I think, and the Abraham Accords are going to expand. It may take another year or two. I mean, I think that the news coming out of Gaza, I'm sure you'll want to talk about that, but the news coming out of Gaza is such, it's so irritating, it's so false, but it's having such an impact. When papers like the New York Times, devote half their front page to a fake picture of a poor kid, a poor Palestinian kid who's suffering, not because he's being starved, but because he's got a congenital disease. But they don't bother to tell you that. It's very hard to make progress now, but it's gonna resolve. And I think we're on a path to expand the Abraham Accords dramatically. I think certainly in the next couple of years.
So the strategy behind the Abraham Accords, which was so brilliant, and I know you were very much a key player in this architect of the Abraham Accords, was not just like a make friends with countries, but there was a real deep strategy of marginalizing the Palestinian issue and creating true alliances. Is that right?
Sure, and I think look, on the Palestinian front, it was very important to break this Palestinian veto, because there's 22 countries in the Arab League, and historically they've all acted monolithically with however the Palestinians decided to go, and it made any advancements impossible. Now, look, the UAE, what does the UAE have against Israel? They've never been at war, right? There's never been any kind of armed conflict, and frankly, they have a lot in common, and they have lots to gain from each other. And so, but the Palestinians were holding everything up. They said, nothing can get done unless we're satisfied, and they were never satisfied. There was nothing that Israel could give them reasonably, other than committing suicide, that would satisfy them. So breaking that veto was critical, and it's now broken. I mean, you can see now that a lot of these countries are beginning to act independently, even in other areas, without regard to what the Palestinians have to say. I think the October 7th massacre, I think, was probably the death knell of this standing in unison with the Palestinians because of how horrible they had acted. And so, yeah, the Abraham Accords, it not only does it strengthen Israel, strengthen the region, represent a victory for the moderates over the extremists, significant defeat for the extremists, but also it tells the Palestinians, look, guys, the game is over. This whole extortion game, the shakedown of all these countries getting money so that you won't inflame their streets. It's over. It's over. We've figured you out. They came to this realization, unfortunately, far too late, but we figured you out. and you're kind of on your own. And that's, I think, an important message to the Palestinians. If, and I doubt this, if one day they're able to get responsible leadership, hopefully they'll recognize the fact that you don't advance the interests of your people by extorting other countries.
Well, it seems like October 7th not only did all that you just said, but it also drew the curtain away from the real player here, which is Iran. Um, the Palestinians are just a puppet of Iran. And there are so many countries that are fearful of the Iranian power, like Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure that fearful is the correct word, but definitely at odds with Iran's power. So where do you see Saudi Arabia fitting into the Abraham Accords at this point?
Well, look, Iran has been weakened in ways that we haven't seen in our lifetime. The attack, first of all, I mean, the Israeli attack, which began this 12-day war, was astounding. I mean, way beyond even Israel's own expectations. I mean, they were flying in and out of Tehran the way JetBlue flies in and out of Fort Lauderdale. I mean, it was absolutely astounding that they were able to control the airspace. And as they began to do that, if you remember, like at the beginning of the war, Secretary Rubio was a little tentative. He said, look, this isn't our war. This isn't something that we began. But over time, it became clear that Israel had made such advances that there was an opportunity for America to join in a way that would be successful. And so, at the end of that 12-day period, look, this happens. I don't think this has ever happened before in history. Some people may argue with it about some short event in 1956, but I think this is really the first time in history that the United States and Israel collectively, went to war against a common enemy. And look, Trump was relying upon Netanyahu to clear the airspace. Netanyahu was relying on Trump to drop the heavy bombs. Those bombs had to hit with the precision of threading a needle. Everything had to everything had to go flawlessly. I mean, I think Trump was betting. He really was betting his historical legacy on this, and so was Netanyahu. And that's why the relationship today is so close, because they bet their futures on a very, very complicated operation. And again, they succeeded flawlessly. And I think that resonated very strongly with Israel's neighbors, with the Saudis. Again, Israel is not just a regional superpower. In the aftermath of this event, Israel is a superpower. I mean, Israel can do things that, with the exception of America, no one in the world can do. And I think even Israel's, enemies are looking at Israel right now and saying, wow, we can't beat these guys. We better join them. And I think that's a very important signal to advance the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, I think that's completely, a great point, completely correct, and a fabulous point. I think that Israel has emerged not only as a regional partner, like you had just said, but their ability to do operations like the beeper operation. And in Iran, during the 12-day war, they decimated the financial systems through a cyber attack also, and wiped out the alternative financial system that Khamenei had built for 10 years. So in addition to their incredible might as an IDF fighting force, they also have this cyber piece of it that's unparalleled. So they are a great partner and an ally for America, and I'm hoping that that has come to light. I think it has. I mean, it seems to me that the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump is very strong, even though the news is trying to paint that as less than that.
Yeah, look, the people that the isolationists of in our country, and look, we have them on both parties. We've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson, and we've got Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. We got all these these kind of whack jobs on both sides, and all they want is to create the daylight between Trump and Netanyahu. So they're trying to make it to create as much daylight. And look, they're not joined at the hip, and they don't agree on everything. And there's but the mutual respect that they have for each other today, I think, is unparalleled between any two major world leaders. And but you're right. It is absolutely the strategy, especially unfortunately of the isolationists in the Republican Party. It is absolutely their strategy to demonize Netanyahu and make it harder politically for Trump to be allied with him. But they haven't succeeded so far in any of their efforts.
That's great to hear. With regard to uh, what France has just announced, President Macron and Secretary David Cameron of the UK, that they will be recognizing Palestine as a state. How do you see that as affecting what's going on? It's rewarding terrorists with this unbelievable event.
Yeah, to call it a mistake would not be doing it justice. It's a colossal error. I think history will be unkind to that decision. Now, remember, look, if you've been to London and Paris, as have I, these are fastly becoming failed states. I mean, there are places, there are parts of London and parts of Paris that the police won't even go to anymore because they basically are governed now by Sharia law because these countries have not policed their borders. They've allowed radical Islamists to take control over parts of their cities and under tremendous pressure to try to appease them. Now it's not going to work. I mean, they think they're going to recognize the state of Palestine, and all of a sudden, there'll be the Islamists will turn into law-abiding citizens. Not at all. They're just going to take encourage from that and seek more. So it's under, I understand why these countries have done it. And, I don't know if you saw the response from my dear friend and successor, Mike Huckabee, who's doing a great job taking over from me. And he said, yeah, it's a great idea to recognize a Palestinian state. How about, Saint-Tropez and Cannes? We'll put it right there. That's a great location for it. And and he's right. I mean, who are these people to recognize a state of another sovereign nation? I mean, it's unthinkable. Like that, apart from how stupid it is, it's just what gives you the right to recognize some other state inside of another sovereign country. So, as I think Trump was asked about that, and I think his response was, "Yeah, it does. Fortunately, what they say doesn't matter anyway." And I think that's really the way to look at it. I mean, I wouldn't give it too much oxygen because I think it's going nowhere.
I'm sure you've seen the uh, post that's gone viral where it shows that every mayor in England right now is a Muslim, and we're now looking at a potential Mayor Mamdani. Totally unthinkable for New York, the largest population of Jews outside of Israel. Um, what do you think about that? And now this morning I saw another contender for a city out west, also a Muslim who just has emerged.
It's stunning. I mean, I can't make fun of England and France anymore because it's come to our own shores. The fact and New York is not just New York is the largest population of Jews outside of Israel, but as a city, it's the single largest population of Jews in the world. It's got more Jews than either Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. And the idea that we would potentially have a mayor who supports BDS, who doesn't think Israel has the right to be a Jewish state, who supports Hamas, who identifies with all the crazy pro-Hamas organizations. You would think that New York would be the one place where that couldn't happen. And look, I believe there are more anti-Mamdani votes out there than pro-Mamdani votes. The question is, are they going to be split three ways? Because if we end up with Cuomo, Adams, and Sliwa, he's going to be the mayor. Mamdani is going to be the mayor. Now, if hopefully they can get out of their own way, these three guys, I'm indifferent to who it is. I don't live in New York City, but man, I mean, they got to pick a horse. and there ought to be, two candidates, a pro-Mamdani candidate and an anti-Mamdani candidate, and then I think he's going to lose. But right now, if you were betting, you would be betting that he's going to be the next mayor, and it's unthinkable, and it has real consequences, Trudy, because people say, well, New York City, they don't make foreign policy; he's just the mayor. But you know what he does control? He controls the police. And when we've already seen how people who identify as Jewish, who look Jewish, they're just getting beaten up left and right. And if the cops aren't going to police it, which is where he will take this city, you're not going to be able to live comfortably as a Jew in New York any more than you can live in comfortably in other hostile places. So it's a very dark moment in America that this is what we're confronting.
Very dark indeed. Just bringing us to another dark second in time. Um, David, when I joined you on the March of the Living in April of 2023, Israel was in the midst of massive internal protests over judicial reform. And I will never forget something that you said to our group that you led. You said, throughout history, Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel has rarely lasted more than about 70 years or so, whether during the United Monarchy of David and Solomon or later under the Hasmonean dynasty. And here we are in 2023, modern Israel just crossing that same threshold over 75 years of Jewish rule. And you warned at that time that internal division could be what's at risk, putting us at risk at that moment. That stuck with me. And then came October 7th. Looking back in light of everything that's happened, how do you reflect on that historical pattern? What does it mean for Israel today? Has the shock of October 7th helped heal those internal rifts that you were concerned about? Do you still worry about Israel's greatest threats not only coming from the outside, or do you see us now at a very critical moment because of those threats?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that uh, there's no question that October 7th was, a wake-up call. It provoked intensely strong feelings in all directions, but very, very much so a feeling of patriotism and responsibility that people had for each other. Um, you know, just yesterday, Donald Trump was saying that, if we're up to me, he sort of implied, if we're up to me, I would just kill everybody in Hamas and try to save the hostages. But if I can't, I still have to kill all the Hamas. And he said, I don't really understand why Israel is taking so much time, but I guess it's that unique quality of Israel that they really care about each other in ways that are not present in most countries. And that, he's right about that, and the fact is that, the concern that the Israeli people have for the hostages, that they're coming out, and protesting about it. I mean, that is, it creates political challenges, obviously, for those who are running the government, but it is a sign of a great quality of the Jewish people, especially the Israeli people, that they really do care about each other, and they're willing to stop everything they're doing and make demands that whatever 20 people still alive, 30 people that are maybe not alive, that even that everything stop until those hostages come out. Again, creates lots of political and tactical issues, but it does tell you something about the Israeli people. I mean, Israelis are not willing to give up a single human life. They care about each other. And so what I'm seeing from all of this, you juxtapose the judicial reform protests against where we are today. Of course, look, it's a country with lots of opinions and lots of very strong opinions. But I do see in Israel a core value system of love of country, love of each other, responsibility for the Jewish people, and a sense of where they stand in the world as the ultimate vanguard of Judaism for the next 100 years. I think it's pretty remarkable. So, I say everybody, after going through all this, and I just got back a couple of days ago, I'm bullish on Israel. I mean, I think that, I think you're going to see more and more people, making sure they got a place to run to if they need to. Certainly in France and England, you see that already. I'm bullish on Israel. I think Israel is gonna come out of this stronger than ever. They're certainly, I mean, there's no question that they're stronger today than they were on October 6th of 2023, notwithstanding the massive price that they paid. They're a stronger country, more cohesive, certainly more feared and respected around the world. Hated by some, sure, but again, in this world, always better to be feared than loved, right? And they're certainly feared. So, that's all good. In America, look, we got to work harder in America. I mean, we are, we have, I don't know, there's like a group in New York called Jews for Mamdani. I mean, it's insanity, right? What do they call it? Like, chickens for KFC, right? It's just craziness. But I'm feeling good about Israel's prospects, notwithstanding all the turmoil there.
I'm happy to hear that optimism. I didn't hear it back in 2023 in April on March of the Living when we were in Poland together, and it's good to hear that because it seems like so much has happened since then. The world has so changed. Israel has so changed, and I'm happy to hear the optimism that you feel it changed in a good direction. So that is really great. What I can't believe is what is going on with this the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And so yeah, now the all of the uh, entities that are trying to pull us apart seem to be unifying and seem to be strong and seem to be very complicit. So we have the United Nations, you have the media. What do you see happening here? We're actually, as a people, just as you said, we love people, we love life. We are helping the Gazans. I'm sure you saw the video of the Gazans cheering for the IDF and waving flags and thanking them. And yet we open up the New York Times and we see this type of media. So how do you put that into perspective?
Look, I think we're going to have to live with this to some extent. I mean, people criticize Israel for not doing a better job of explaining itself, and maybe they could. Maybe there'd be a better way to have a spokesman come up every day or two and explain what's happening in Gaza and what they're doing. I mean, they make a fair point, which is that in the history of warfare, nobody's ever been forced to feed their enemies. I mean, it's this is being judged on a completely different standard than anything else. I mean, if you go back to World War II, where I think everybody kind of agrees who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. If you look at the number of casualties in World War II, overwhelmingly the most people killed in World War II were Germans. I mean, does that mean that the Germans really had a virtuous cause? No, it's thank God there was. Thank God. I mean, thank God we won the war, and thank God that most of the people killed were Germans. But Israel doesn't get graded on that metric, and it's very frustrating. But look, the New York Times, New York Times was concealing the Holocaust in the 1940s. I mean, they have a long, long history of hostility, run by, a long history of being run by anti-Zionist German Jews, and anti-Zionist Jews are the most anti-Zionist, people in the world. So it's not a surprise that that's where we are. I don't think we're going to convince the Times to change their view. They would apologize that they put on the front page a picture of a debilitated kid who was not debilitated because he was starving, but because he had a congenital disease. That would have been appropriate, but they won't. They won't apologize. And I don't think, notwithstanding all the settlements that we're going to start seeing on college campuses, I don't think we're going to really change the hearts and minds. It's going to be hard. But Israel's got to be strong. It's got to keep doing what it's doing. When I had Ron Dermer on my podcast last week, and I said we talked about this, and I said to him, why is Israel feeding its enemies? I mean, and he said, look, it's just who we are. Like we're not feeding our enemies because we want to get good press coverage in the New York Times. We're not looking to satisfy the UN. It's not possible to satisfy the UN. It's just who we are. Like, we as Jews, we don't want, if we can avoid human suffering, we're going to avoid human suffering. And that really is what Israel is doing, getting no credit for it whatsoever. And the other thing I would just say, Trudy, because it's an important point for people to understand. in the history of every other war in the Middle East, the other Arab countries have opened their borders. It allowed the pressure valve to get released a little bit so people could get out of harm's way. You know, there was a civil war in Syria. 500,000 Syrians, you know, moved into Turkey. They moved elsewhere. You know, there are refugees moving across the continent in Africa as a result of civil wars. Nobody opened their doors to a single Gazan refugee. Nobody said, hey, you know, this is a war zone. Let's get the women and children out of harm's way while this war is going on. Not one single civilian from Gaza was accepted in any one of the neighboring countries. So now they're crying, you know, crocodile tears. You know, these poor civilians, they did nothing. And they could have done everything to save these people. So this is, you know, this is the life of being a Zionist, you know, in the 21st century. But we know it's right. We know who's right. We do have friends. You know, we got friends, you know, thank God we got some friends. We got a great president in the United States. We got a great president in Argentina. We got some friends now in Eastern Europe. You know, we got some good organizations. I mean, there's still plenty of us who know what's going on. We got some Christian friends who are very, very reliable. So you know, it's not like we haven't seen this before. And you know, what I think is just, you know, I was talking about this with one of my other guests on my podcast, Michael Oren, and he said, look, you know, a lot of these people, they don't care about Palestine. They don't even know what Palestine is. They couldn't find it on a map. They started off with George Floyd, right? And they became Black Lives Matter. Then they ran to Greta Thunberg, you know, and they became climate change, you know. Now this is where all the news is, so this is where the energy is. But eventually the news will change and there'll be some other cause and they'll run to that. So, you know, I don't think as large in number as they are, at least in America, they're large in number, but they're really shallow in substance. And, you know, let's hope. I mean, I'm not hoping for another catastrophe, but let's hope that something else, you know, garners their attention and they can leave us alone for a while.
Well, I do love that optimism. Hopefully that will happen. Hoping that a Mamdani doesn't change the course of that, or
Yeah.
other mayors like that. So there's hoping, David. So happy to hear that. Um, Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Dan, thank you so much for the service that you've given to our country and to our people. As ambassador, you have done so much for all of us. So thank you so much. Um, your perspectives are grounded. They're grounded in history and diplomacy, and you help us see what's really at stake, not just for Israel, but all of us who care about the truth. We know the road ahead is uncertain, but voices like yours help light the way for all of us. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much.
Thank you, Trudy.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday night at 9:30 on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past podcasts, you can find us on Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.